Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Ben Wixie, and I am the National Agricultural Sales Manager for Germinal. Before we start, a few things of housekeeping as always. Please ask questions as we go along. There is a tab, a Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. Please type questions or comments in there. Please don't use the chat button because we can't access it in the recording and we can't see the comments that are made in the recording. So please, if you use the Q&A, that would be great. Helen is in the background here tonight. I'm down at Melksham at the research station, and unfortunately, we've not got the best internet connection here at the moment. So Helen is in the background, and if my internet connection drops, then Helen will step in and run the rest of the show. But hopefully that won't be necessary. We'll see. We are recording the session for those that can't make it live and for them to watch the recording. And please, can I ask you to complete the survey at the end? It's very, very useful for us in terms of what topics to cover next time and what you think of our performance or areas that we could improve on. So multi-species leys, multi-species swards. I just wanted to talk about what we as Germinal think the definition is. Once you have a grass mixture that is perennial ryegrass and clover, once you add more clover or timothy or cocksfoot or any of the herbs to that, in our mind, that becomes a multi-species sward. Whether that's right or wrong doesn't really matter, but that's what we think of the terminology as multi-species sward. So, right, so to start, a big thank you to our 3 farmers who volunteered their time tonight. A little bit of press ganging perhaps some of it, but thank you very much for your time and energies that you put into this. I hope we have a very interesting discussion afterwards. We're going to have 3 presentations, 15 minutes apiece. I won't interrupt or ask questions. Let you guys talk and present. Tell us about your farm, and with in particular interest to the multi-species side of it, obviously. And then we'll move through all 3 presentations and have questions at the end. So please, everybody, ask questions, type the questions in as you go along, and I'll then ask them to the panel at the end. If you've got a question for everybody, put all on it. If it's for one particular farmer, then put their name on it, please, and I'll ask them directly. Okay, so Sam, you're top of my screen at the moment on the left, so I'm going to start with you. I will start your presentation, and then if you would like to introduce yourself and take it away. Just
thank you very much.
Hang on, Sam. Have you got it on full screen now?
Yes.
Excellent. Right, over to you, Sam.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Ben, for the introduction. Sam Chesney is my name, and I'm farming on the very east side of Northern Ireland. Actually, we're closer to Scotland than we are Belfast, so we're sort of stuck out in the sea. Sort of ground that we have would be heavy loam, but prone to drought, if you know what I mean. It's very, very hard. So I'm actually one of the Grassland management technology demonstration farms in Northern Ireland for this past year or so. And prior to that, we were a focus farm. And we picked the Grassland management now because we thought we have been as far down the road about the beef as we possibly could. And the only way we could improve our farm output was to improve our grass and you know our fodder that we were producing for our cows. Next slide, Ben, please. So we were only farming 70 hectares. In Northern Ireland, the farms are quite small and usually family farms. Ground rent in Northern Ireland is really prohibitive. You're talking up towards £200 an acre for an annual let. There are no tenant farms in Northern Ireland. Ground is in the region. Well, I suppose in England it's creeping up there too, £10,000 to £12,000 an acre to buy. So every acre we have has to count. So we run our stock on a paddock grazing sort of system, 3 days in, 3 days out, or 21 days out, and rotate them around the farm. We have a block of silage ground. We have grazing paddocks. We grow red clover for silage, for finishing cattle. And we have 120 suckler cows to beef with a calving index of 358 days. We have also blade calves which we finish. We buy them in at 12 weeks and finish at 21 months. We have a spring lambing ewe flock as well. So we're pushing our stocking rates as high as we can. At present, the stocking rate on this farm is standing at 3.4 livestock units per hectare, and it's probably too high. What are we going to do now? Well, actually, we're pulling the easing back a bit. I think we're too intensive. How are we doing this? We're trying to reduce the amount of fertilizer we use, and this is where the multi-species sward has come into play. We've been growing multi-species of a sort for this past 20 years. We've had Timothy in all our grass seed mixtures over the past 20 years. We've been adding red clover to grass and clover mixes over this past 10 years. And more so this last 4 years or 5 years, we've been dedicating it to plantain chicory, red clover, white clover, and Timothy, and the tetraploid ryegrass. Next slide, please. So those are the basic, technologies that we're using in our farm. We're very big into soil sampling. We're soil sampling the whole place every other year, and we're soil down to 6 inches. So we're looking at the organic matter that we have on our soils, because going forward, we just had a chat earlier about carbon neutrality and what year the governments are wanting us to be there. Unfortunately, our people think we should be neutral by 2045, which is impossible. But we're down that road anyhow. We're taking samples. We're trying to add organic matter. We don't spread any slurry on our grazing platform. It's all farmyard manure, well composted. We're measuring grass every week. We're taking grass samples every 2 weeks. We have a weather station, so we're analysing the soil temperature to wind speed to rainfall to everything really. That's all linked up and it goes down to AgriNet. And we're weighing all our animals, which is very important to see whether the swards we're growing are producing the goods. We're weighing with an EID system, and we're weighing cattle, every 30 days. So we know exactly what everything is doing. So it's very important at the base level that you get all that right, the soil sample, the soil analysis, the pH, because pH really is the root to grow grass, whether it be herbal leys or whether it be anything else. You must have a good pH. If your pH is 5.5, you're wasting 33% of your fertilizer. You're throwing that up into the air. So that's a big driver for any farmer. Next slide, please, Ben. So we're operating a rotational paddock grazing system. That's just a view down through some of our ground there. And we're a drumlin type farm, grows grass very well. Our paddock sizes are 1 hectare, so we're putting stock into those paddocks to fill a hectare to eat in 3 days. We're putting them into 3,100 kilos of grazing and taking them out at 16, 15, 14. It's been very dry here this last 6 weeks. So, we're grazing ground too hard. We're down to 1,400 in some places to an effect that we've actually had to slow the rotation down. We had to house some cattle again to slow the whole rotation down because we're going to be left with nothing. We've installed laneways. We've access to every paddock. We've water troughs in every paddock, which is very important. We've fenced off all the waterways. We're growing trees in areas that are just awkward to get at. So we're trying to look at our biodiversity as well. We're trying to, as being one of the most heavily stocked beef farms in Northern Ireland, we want to prove a point that we can be very, very environmentally responsible as well. Ben, next slide. So we have been part of the grass check for the last 4 years now. And in 2019, when this figure was done, we grew 14.2 tons of dry matter per hectare. So that's good for Northern Ireland. If you go further down your part of the country, on down towards middle of Wales, into middle England, you could probably grow more. The grass varieties that we're all using now are capable of growing 20 tons, but it's about the utilisation. But in 19, we utilised 92%, and that's with a lot of extra work by measuring in and measuring out and calculating and all that. But we utilised 92% of that, which is very, very good. So we are hoping to graze more grass and save on the cost of con acre, save on the cost of renting ground. The average grass growth in Northern Ireland for an average farmer is 5.5 tonnes, and we are growing 14.2 tonnes. And everybody's basically paying the same ground rent. So really, we're getting a two-thirds more grass for the same price as the guy is paying the rent for 5.5 tonnes. So that's what we're doing. We're putting everything on AgriNet. I know a lot of farmers don't want to be bothered with computers and wedges and all this sort of stuff, but it's very interesting to see where your wedge is, to see if you've got grass going forward. And it's very important to use this sort of technology when you're either A, short of grass, or B, you want to take grass out, and you want to see if the drought is going to hit you, and you can see this 2 weeks ahead, and that's when you have to take drastic actions. So our covers, that's really, you can see the covers there. We're grazing 2700 to 3100 and taking them out at 15 to 1600. So in at ankle and out at toe height. That's what we usually do. Thank you, Ben. So yeah, we're grazing more herbal leys now, and our rationale behind that is to be more really environmentally responsible. We're getting hit in the head all the time by meat suppliers that, what's your carbon footprint? What are you doing to help the environment? Apart from growing herbal mixtures, we grow red clover and for silage, and this is part of our TMR for finishing our beef in the winter time, is the red clover, silage, straw, and a blend. And it's unbelievable. 21% protein with a blend, and we can reduce our protein levels in our blends by 2 to 4%, which again is helping the environment by reducing the carbon brought onto this farm. But we started working with blade calves now. This is our third season with them, and we dedicated the complete mixed species swards to the blade cattle to see how they worked on a non-3/4 bred beef animal. Holstein genetics, Angus, sire. So that mixture on the very left there, it grew every bit as well as our perennial ryegrass. The benefits we saw of it were when we had drought conditions, and we're having that increasingly every year now, from sort of May to the middle of June, beginning of July. It grew exactly the same. It didn't stop growing. When my perennial ryegrass swards were growing 0, the mixed species did 45 kilos a week of dry matter per hectare. So that was keeping us going. So hence we're increasing that volume. So in that sward, those calves are eating, we have red clover, white clover, tetraploid ryegrass, chicory, and plantain. Now we really trashed this field, this block of ground with these calves. We kept them on it continuously, all but 2 weeks in the middle of the summer to give it a break. We paddocked the field, we moved them up and down the field, to see if we could destroy it, basically for research purposes, we thought, and we didn't. It's back as strong as ever this year again. These calves were not dosed at all. They were dosed pre-housing, but at turnout in February, they received no antibiotic drenches at all while on the mixed species. We did dose them for lungworm when they came into the house in October, but apart from that, they received no worm drenches at grass. So the antibiotic properties, we believe, in the mixed species sward and chicory and the plantain has helped the cattle to thrive on these animals. They did 1 kilo a day at grass. Our own beef llamas and cross calves did 1.4 a day on perennial, but they had been dosed, and I expected that because the genetic merit was better in the continentals. But all in all, they did exceptionally well. The fertilizer we used on the perennial ryegrass around the farm was 182 kilos of nitrogen per hectare, and on the mixed species sward we used 90 kilos, so exactly half, and we grew the same amount of grass. So going forward with more mixed species in, and we have a wee cover crop with a wee bit of rape on it, so it's about a fortnight of grazing. I think Ben, when he was over last year, saw it was in red start, so we grazed red start, and then we went to mixed species after that. So it's looking really well. Improvement in soil, this is a heavy, sticky field. It opens the ground up well, deep rooting plants. Stalking rate has been excellent. We're keeping the stock as tight as we can keep them. We did give it a run with a topper in the middle of the summer last year because a bit of that straggly stuff, a wee bit of Timothy there, needed knocked down and sort of leveled up a bit, and it worked very well. So yeah, we were very pleased with it. Money well invested, and you know, there is thoughts in my head, maybe I should be planting a straight field of plantain for finishing lambs. When you're talking, you know, plantain at 16 to 28% protein, chicory 18 to 27% protein, so you're in a sort of a crude protein of 11 to 13 and a high M8, you know, 12. So you really couldn't buy anything in a bag that'll compete with grass or indeed the mixed species. The red clovers we used were Aber Claret. Actually, it's not an advert for Germinal, but really mostly Aber varieties we're using here on the farm. Next slide, please, Ben. We're involved over here in a European Innovation Partnership funded project. There's a group of 5 of us, and we're looking into the benefits of mixed species sward. We have all different tasks. My task last year was establishment, and basically what I was to do was to go and drill mixed species into a ley. It didn't work. It didn't work. We're going to have to do more than that to do that. This year's topic that I'm going to cover is that we're going to look at blood samples from the cattle grazing mixed species to see if there's any difference in the enzyme levels or the blood or the taste of the meat. So that's what I'm looking at in particular in my part. Other guys are doing other things, but it's all very positive. Mixed species has really taken off in Northern Ireland, and to a point that I do believe, it's not guaranteed, but I do believe in our future farm support, mixed species will be an extra box or an extra, as we say, an extra thing to hang on the coat hanger for support reasons. So we're turning our stock out in mid-February and housing in October, 230-day grazing season, and we run them in groups of 40. So with 3 groups of 40, you know, if you're not paddock grazing, if you're on an intensive farm, not an extensive farm. I know Simon's an extensive farm. We're an intensive farm. If you're in an intensive area, you know, you have better fertility because you're moving to a higher plane of nutrition. We have a very good calving index. We're calving in 9 weeks. We're killing our bulls out of the house at present. They're sort of 14.5 months and they're 400 to 425 kilos. We have changed our rationale here. We've bought 2 stabilizer bulls to try and mitigate the cost of protein. We're trying to make flesh, cattle easier fleshed. Our limousines just are great cattle, great growth, but just too hard to put fat on, just too hard to put condition on. So we're investing in a bit of money in stabilizer genetics with better feed intakes. So that's where we're going with that there. Next slide, please, Ben. So you know, we're doing a synchronization program, just a bit about our cattle. We synchronized all our cows for years, but we're now down to doing just a synchronized batch of heifers every year. We synchronize them to top bull in the top 1%. The stock bulls we have are all in the top 1 or top 5%. We're really sold on figures. It's just like the grass. We're trying to micromanage everything, and you see our size of our farm. The chances of increasing acreage in this area are very slim. I have 500 cow dairy cows, men right around me, and I always say this, and tongue in cheek, the dairy men are so hungry in my country they will come and cut their garden or come and cut the grass in your spouting and take it home with them. They're that hungry here. So ground is a big limiting fact in expansion in Northern Ireland. And that's why you've seen so many farmers come across to you guys over there. But we're targeting live weight gains of 1.4, 1.7. We're looking for a kilo carcass a day. That's what we're looking for from our bulls, and we're getting that. And going forward, it takes good grass to grow that. And you know, the herbal mixture, I think, will benefit that there. Next slide, then. I think I'm nearly up time, have I? Yeah, I think we've had that one.
We?
Yeah. Yeah. Reseeding policy. Well, it's based on measurements, really. You know, well, unless it's a completely dry system. But you know, we can see from year to year how fields are performing with the aggregate data. And what we normally do is go in the autumn or sort of midsummer, do it with red start or stubble turnips, graze that in the autumn. Then the next year, farmer manure, plough, mixed species sward. We'll put a rape covered crop, half a rape covered crop over the top of the mixed species this year, just to give it a wee bit of protection from the harsh east wind. We have a really harsh cold wind here, and to sort of protect it. And then we'll graze that off there, and then we'll go on to the next place. We're using, as I say, we've used ours for years. We've used Timothy on our grass seeds for 20 years, and that's just to add a wee bit of palatability. And even in the springtime when it's cold and wet and horrible, they've a wee hard thing to bite and sticks to them. Mixture of tetraploid. I'm very fond of tetraploid grasses. I like to see fields well grazed. I like to see it grazed down like the top of the table. And the tetraploids really lend themselves to that. Some of the people said that when you grow mixed species, you're not get a good clean out. The first year we had a total mixed species sward. We put cows and calves on it in the autumn time, and I had to physically move them from that to the next paddock. They wouldn't go themselves. They just wanted to lie there, and they were licking the sod nearly. They really did enjoy it. Likewise, when I was moving my blade calves across another field of ordinary grass, any dockings to saw, that was the first thing they ate. There was no selective grazing. So I believe that the mixed species have taught them not to selective graze. So yeah, that's sort of anecdotal things that we have found about them. But to date, we've found nothing we don't like about them. Next slide, please.
I'm going to have to.
Yep. Well, that's just really about silage management. We don't cut mixed species for silage. We did it once, and we thought it was too much water in the silo pit. We do red clover, and if you're making red clover silage, you must put an additive on it. Our analysis jumped from a crude protein of 17 to a crude protein of 21, and it was a job getting a guy with an applicator to put it on. Last year was the first time we did it, and the difference was day and night. It's one of the biggest jump forwards in quality that we could ever do. So that was the red clover, the 4-cut system, just pure red clover. Roughly 32 bales to the acre of red clover, so you can work that out how many tons that is. But it's rocket fuel for finishing cattle. It's also an acid. It's a rumen buffer as well. And so to me, it was a money well spent. So reducing our soya protein input by 4% protein in a mix. So 4 6 is £24 a ton. It's a saving us, so it works very well. Okay, next slide, please.
That's it.
That's it. So that's really a quick rundown of what we're doing. I know the other guys are totally different scale and size, but all we have found with mixed species is all positive, and we haven't found anything to the contrary yet. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. Thanks very much for sharing that. Right, John, if you could share your screen and take your PowerPoint away, that'd be great. Please, guys, ask questions. Few coming in. But the more we have, the better. And then if you just click on that icon, John, at the bottom to make it into a full screen for us. Thank you. There we go.
Yeah, hello, good evening. I'm John Goodwin. I live in Radnorshire in Mid Wales. We're a traditional family farm, 500 acres. We just crossed the English-Welsh border, mostly in Wales, few acres in England. We're about 600 feet above sea level on medium loam. And I'm running 70 Angus cows, which we finished the stock out about 2-year-old. They all go to Waitrose. I run 800 Exlana wool shedding ewes, which we run on a very easy care sort of outdoor lambing system. Got 200 eggs of crop in, wheat, oats, beet, mowing leys, potatoes. We've got a few pigs. My wife runs a farmhouse accommodation business. We've got a little farm shop opening next week. And in addition to that, I've just graduated in a master's and just started a Doctor of Agriculture course at Aberystwyth. What have we done traditionally? We've used 5-year cut and graze, ryegrass and white clover leys. We've started adding chicory and plantain and more recently yarrow to those 3 or 4 years ago. And the first really truly diverse leys we planted last September. Why have we done this? Well, firstly, to reduce our fertilizer dependence, to get our nitrogen bills down. We put red clover in. That's certainly a big motivation. Secondly, we're in the rain shadow of the Welsh mountains, and these old perennial ryegrass and white clover grazing leys tend to be quite droughty. If we have a dry July, then we can end up with nothing, just yellow. So we've been looking for these deep-rooted species, chicory and plantain, festuloliums, which we're very impressed with, and red clover. Thirdly, another motivating factor is animal health factors. Did my master's dissertation looking at the influence of worms upon Pastorella, and one of the key findings was that we have nematodirus here in September as well as in May, which was very unexpected, really. We always expected to see it in May, but not in September, and significant amounts of nematodirus. And that we found Pastorella to be highly associated with immune suppression caused by gastrointestinal worms. On the right-hand side here now, we've got 3 photos. The top one is a set of long lambs out of the abattoir, which are full of Pastorella. You can see the dark areas at the top of the lungs. The middle one is a PCR track, which we're using to identify the diseases which are causing this. And I'm sure you'll be familiar with PCR from the COVID pandemic, but you can see, I don't know, can you see my cursor or not? Anyway, the top track is Mycoplasma, and the bottom track is Mannheimia, which is traditional, which is classical Pastorella. And the bottom diagram is incidence of Pastorella according to egg count. So the vertical axis is number of lambs. The horizontal axis is fecal egg count. Blue bars are lambs free of Pastorella. Red bars are lambs with Pastorella. And if you look, there's an awful lot of lambs at the left-hand side that have no worms and no Pastorella. But as the egg count increases, the incidence of Pastorella increases rapidly, and to the point where the high egg count lambs, there's more lambs have got Pastorella than haven't. And I think we have convinced ourselves that Pastorella incidence is heavily associated with worm burden. So we've been looking for self-medication opportunities for the lambs, notably chicory with its anthelmintic properties, yarrow with its high mineral content, its deep rootedness, and well, traditional health properties. And if we look in the old seed catalogues, many of the old leys used to have trefoils and yarrow and all manner of things. And I think it's there's probably a lot of truth in those old seed catalogues. So top left here now, we have our old 5-year ryegrass and white clover ley. Top right is the Germinal diverse mix. And the first thing to notice is just the difference in color between them. And you can see it in the bottom photo as well. It's not the best of photos, but the amount of root mass on the Germinal mix is huge compared to that of the old ryegrass and white clover ley. And I think it shows in the performance of the layers in general. You can see the taproot from a chicory plant growing straight down through that mat, and we're all in all, we're quite impressed with the performance of the mixed ley, of the diverse ley. So how are we going to utilize this? We've had a rethink about our rotation, because the whole farm is in rotation between cereals and grassland, and we've split up our grazing and our mowing crops largely. Mowing leys we're growing instead of maize and instead of whole crop, and we can of course graze them on the shoulders of the season in the autumn and the spring. And the diverse grazing leys, which we can mow if necessary, but we find the whole system to be cheaper compared to cropping per unit of feed stuff. It's always available. It's productive because we're still using all the best varieties of ryegrasses and clovers, and we're adding festuloliums into that, which we think are also very productive. And this is all done. We take quite a pragmatic approach to it. Each species is there for a reason. Perhaps we should be considering other herbs, things like samfoin with red clover in a grazing ley. Perhaps we should be thinking about samfoin with its anti-bloat properties, and potentially other things like trefoils, which would add more legumes into the mix, and perhaps add another layer to the nitrogen fixing ability. So there's our seed labels. On the left is our diverse ley with 3 ryegrasses, 2 of which are diploid, 1 of which is tetraploid, quite diploid orientated for that tillering ability. Timothy, we've got 5 white clovers in it, all different leaf sizes from small up to large leaf size. We've got early and late red clover, cocksfoot, chicory, yarrow and plantain, and then on 1 or 2 plots we have added festulolium to that as well, aberroot. And our dedicated mowing ley, we've got a 1-year element, Westerwolds and Egyptian clover, and a 2-year element, Italian ryegrass and red clover, and then back to cereals after 2 years. So we drill it in August, September, normally after oats. We round up it, poultry litter, go through it with a combi disc to subsoil disc and press it, and then we drill it with in the second pass with a Waderstad carrier drill. And on the left is establishment, tremendous establishment, really good ground cover. Yeah, even if it is drilled, it thickens out, and the the herbal element really provides good ground cover very quickly. And as you can see on the April photo in the middle, it's just very, very dense indeed. There's no opportunities for thistles or docks, or, well, I guess a dock will still survive in it, but it's very dense. Very impressed with it. On the right-hand photo, we've got a few days ago, and we've got 5 big cattle an acre out on this, sort of 400 to 500 kilo cattle, and there's still grass there. You can see my hat in the middle of the photo. To the left of my hat is the diverse mixture, which we've just looked at the seed label on, and on the right of it is the plus Aberroot Festulolium mix. It's not the greatest of photos, but the Festulolium mix is, when you're stood in the field, is clearly darker. It's a stronger grass than the ryegrasses, I think, and it looks likely, without it having been a droughty year so far, it looks likely to be a stronger and more resistant mixture, which we will intend to incorporate in our mix in the future. So thank you very much. That's quite a short presentation, but just like to share my details with anyone who's interested, and below is a link to our website, our farm website, and also to my dissertation blog, which is all about biorefining red clover for biopharmaceuticals. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. That's great. Thank you very much. Could you stop sharing your screen, and then we'll
Yeah, I'm just trying to now.
go on to. Thank you, Simon. Thank you for that, John. Thank you very much. I will now put up your rolling photo library, and you're going to talk through your farm and multi-species while these photos are playing in the background. Is that right?
Yes.
There we go.
Cheers, Ben. Good evening, everybody. I'm Simon Bainbridge, and my family and I farm about 1,600 acres in the uplands of Northumberland. We're all organic. Obviously, in Northumberland's England's coldest and most sparsely populated county. Very different to Sam. We're only 1 livestock unit per hectare. We're mainly upland. We're a little bit of hill. 80% of the farm is permanent pasture, so it's rushy, it's rocky, there's open drains running through it, and there's not an awful amount we can do with it. So the 20% that we can work with has got to earn its keep and got to produce for us. We've got 180 Hereford and Suckler cross cows, and we breed all our own replacements. The heifers calve at 2 years, and we bull the heifers for 6 weeks and the cows for 9. And then everything else is finished up on the farm between 18 and 24 months of age. The cattle receive nothing but grass, their mother's milk, and the forages we can grow and farm. We buy nothing in except for rock salt and minerals. We're about 1,450 breeding ewes, a fairly stratified kind of traditional system with Swaledales at the top of the hill, put to the Blueface Leicester. But we've also got some Aberfields and Highlanders as well, helping produce more female replacements. And then our terminal size of choice are Suffolk and Hampshire lambs, Suffolk and Hampshire rams. We also breed all our own replacements. Everything's finished off grass and forage and brassicas. We grow 10 hectares of brassicas each year. The basic rotation on the farm is basically clover and grass, which is either red or white, depending on where we are in the rotation. Obviously, we need to have at least a 5-year gap between red clovers, which is where the white comes in. It would be fantastic to grow more red clover year in, year out, but it's just not possible. And then after the clover and grass, after that starts to run out of steam, we put some brassicas in. Normally red start, we find that's the most successful mix for the farm. And then we finish everything else is grazed on rotational grazing on the red and white clovers. And then once that runs out, the remaining lambs go onto the brassicas. After the brassicas, the following spring, we put whole crop in. So we've kind of refined a mix, and now we put in, we were putting quite kind of oats and peas. The pigeons tend to eat all the peas, and the oats tended to go flat. So now we've moved on to barley and vetch, and then we undersow the new grass ley under it. We are now starting to incorporate white clover in with the red clover as well. And then since the drought of 2018, and this was the change to looking at the multi-species leys. In 2018, we had a fantastic quality feed, but we just had a very small heap, and it cost us a fortune to get through that winter. So at that point, I thought, right, we're needing something a little bit more robust that can still both give us the quality and the quantity during those drought years. The challenges we face, I guess one is the whole crop's a little bit of work in progress. Typically, come August, we think, right, we need to get the whole crop off. It's at the perfect stage for harvesting, and then it tends to rain for 3 weeks, which tends to then kind of spoil the ley underneath. And also getting that balance of the whole crop. It's a fantastic way of getting kind of 10 tons the acres fresh weight of feed, which then is used to feed all the finishing cattle and growing calves the following winter. But the challenge is it's getting that balance between still getting a good take of your new seeds, but also getting that yield. And that, to be fair, is work in progress. Volatility of the weather, which obviously we're all blessed with, that is, seems to be getting worse every year, from the extremes of drought to extremes of rainfall and the beast from the east and all the different things that are thrown at us. And I think that's it. I mean, I've been very quick because my colleague in the British Isles short summary seems to go on quite long, so I've kept that fairly brief. And by multi-species sward is basically red or white clovers, ribgrass, timothy, high sugar grasses, and then berseem clover, and then the whole crop, barley, oats, and vetch. The whole crop's put in about, I think it's about 45 kilos an acre. So I think something like 35 kilos barley, 5 kilos of oats, and I think probably about 5 kilos of vetch, and then undersown with the new ley. And yeah, I think that's it. I hope you've all taken some notes. I'm not quite sure how we well through the photos, Ben.
I can't actually tell you what photo number we're on, but there's plenty of them, and very interesting they are. But if that's what you want to say for now, then we'll leave it.
Yeah, I think so. No, that's thank you very much.
Yeah. Did you mention the chickens?
Yeah, no, completely forgot about the chickens. So actually, that was one of the challenges. We've got these 24,000 organic laying hens in eight houses of 3,000. One of my challenges is that, you wouldn't believe it, but is the chicken muck. So obviously we're putting the chicken muck on. We use a local contractor who puts it on at about 2.5 to 3 tons per hectare with one of these precision muck spreaders. And the problem is, I think it's obviously because of that, the nitrogen in the chicken muck, it's knocking the clover, and the clover's just kind of putting its feet up and having a rest. And I think that's probably one of the challenges. How do we still, I suppose, use that chicken muck whilst still being able to kind of maintain that clover going forward, which is a bit of a challenge. And then also, I think the rotational grazing, I think all of these crops, they love to be rotationally grazed. They love to have a rest. They love not to be sown to, when you are mowing them, it's best to leave 3.5 inches on the ground, which tends to be stem anyway, so why do you want it in the pit? So they love things like that. And I think the challenge is just how do we get the most out of them, and how do we get them to last as long as we can, because then you're reducing your costs when you're putting them in. That was the peas before pigeons ate them. Mm.
Yeah. Did I see Lucerne in some of the photos?
Yeah, we did some Lucerne back in. I forgot about that. We were the monitor farm. We were one of the first monitor farm in England, I think between 2010 and 2013. And then After that, we were a commercial development farm for Waitrose, and we worked with Germinal and all the different supply chains throughout Waitrose, whether it was dairy, lamb, beef, and that was a very interesting project. And I suppose that led us down this line of a lot of the things we're doing. We're also, during that period, we measured the farm, and we were actually carbon neutral as well, on the beef and sheep. We haven't done that same measurement on the hens yet, but that'll be quite interesting to do. And because they're so efficient, you basically got a 1.9 kilo hen laying 20 kilos of egg a year. They're quite an efficient beast. So it'd be interesting to do the carbon footprinting on those as well. But yeah, so and the Lucerne. So Lucerne, we did a trial, I think in 2011. We had a 10-hectare field. 5 hectares was a pure standard Lucerne. The other half, 5 hectares, was a mix of Lucerne and grasses. That was a complete waste of time. Lucerne's got to be grown as a pure stand. I truly believe, probably either before or after red clover, it's probably one of the most amazing crops in the world, and I don't know why we don't grow more of it. I know my late father-in-law grew a lot in Essex, and there was thousands of hectares grown in Essex for Dengie, for kind of drying and making to horse type of thing. But it's the most you mow it, and then you clear the field, and you go back the next day, and you're absolutely convinced you've killed it. And then within 24 hours, not 24 hours, within a day or two, and given the right conditions, it just grows like billio. And I think there was one year we did four crops, and I think it was something like 22% protein and over 12 ME. Yeah. But obviously, it's just got to be carefully managed, and I think there is certain dry fields in the country, in certain areas of the country, where Lucerne could really be an option. And I suppose it's getting that break between. It gives you an option of a break between red clover as well. Yeah, and still gives you the yield. I mean, that's the downside of the white clover. You do not get the growth rates and the yields that you get from a red. But I mean, they're fantastic, fantastic crops.
The Lucerne, I'm in the same camp. I think it's got a lot of potential. Potash is the only major requirement of it, because you're taking off a lot of green material every cut from the field. So as long as you're replacing the potash, it will do you well once you've got it established. Yes. There's no point growing. I mean, you've got a good stand there. There's no point growing Lucerne if you've got waterlogged fields or wet fields. It just will not stand its feet being wet. But if you can put it into a dry field with the right pH, P&K, it will serve you well for 4 years.
Yeah, my father-in-law, he once had some block drains, and the Lucerne roots had gone down 18 feet to find water. And yeah, amazing.
On dry fields that burn up, that can't grow grass, Lucerne is the answer for cutting mainly. There are people that graze it, but your management has to be absolutely spot on to graze it.
Yeah, I saw them trying to graze it in New Zealand, and it didn't seem to be going very successfully. But then you've obviously got the downside. You've got that dormant period in the winter, where the grasses may keep growing. And then I suppose with us being an organic farm, we can't use Roundup. Well, it's probably not Roundup they use, but one of the good things is on a conventional farm in that winter period, once it goes dormant, you can then have a cleanup of your fields of weeds.
In the winter.
But yeah, huge potential.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing your photo so that we can see you all. Question to all of you then. One of the questions that comes up to us a lot is weed control. Multi-species is obviously a lot of broadleaf plants. There's very little chemistry. I know, Simon, this doesn't really affect you, but very little chemistry. What do you guys do in terms of weed control when you're establishing multi-species swards? Sam, do you want to go first and we'll just go around?
When we are establishing, what we have done this year is steel seed bed. Prepared the field, ready to sow, went outside, closed the gate and come back 2 weeks later to see if any weeds had come up. The weeds had come up with and knocked them off with spray again, and then sow it after spray it 2 days later. So that's traditionally what we've been doing. It's coming in after a brassica, so the weed burden is very low anyhow, because it's got a good tramp and it's got a roundup before we've drilled the brassica in as well.
John, have you got anything different to that? Or
Well, really, it's so dense. There's no broadleaf weed problem at all. But the main problem we've got min-tilling after oats is volunteer oats, and they're not a problem. No. They graze out in the autumn, and it never dominates. Although it looks like it's going to dominate soon after establishment, it's not a problem.
Yeah. And Simon, do you
yeah, I mean, obviously it's a bigger challenge for me. We hope that by going into the brassicas for that winter, from that autumn and winter, that helps. And then the following spring, we kind of, with having that whole crop and then getting a good take of grass, it tends to smother out a lot of the weeds. But we're finding that the chicken muck isn't helping our cause, because I think there'll be quite a lot of weed seed coming in the chicken feed, which is then passing through the hen and then going out in the muck.
Right.
Because obviously we're using organic feed. So we've got a kind of a bit of an issue there. But I can remember one of my relations in New Zealand telling me years ago that actually docks weren't a weed, they were just deep root therapy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Vitamin taps, that's what they say.
Right, let's go to some questions from Colin asked a question for Sam. Did the plantain or chicory ever get refused as it got more mature? So, you know, we know that we want to keep on top of the chicory and the plantain in terms of producing leaf in front of the animal, but it sometimes does get away from you. What was your experience?
Haven't had that problem. Where that heavily stuck, they're waiting to get into the next paddock, so that it's not getting into you know, lettuce type size leaves. No, they haven't refused it.
No. Any of the other two? Anybody had any problems with rejection? Or
I've seen chicory going a bit woody and going to flower in a mowing lay, but that's if you're grazing it, it's not a problem grazing it, because they tend to eat it first. In my experience, they love chicory.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Simon, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that the sheep can be quite choosy, and I think with rotational grazing, you sometimes got to force them to kind of eat some of the bits that you want them to eat and leave them in there a bit longer. But so, I mean, cattle-wise, there doesn't seem to be any sort of. They just act like great big lawnmowers. But the sheep are quite picky. I think with those small mouths and obviously a taste for the better things in life, they can leave some things behind.
Yeah, what we've experienced in certain places, and it's not interesting. It's very interesting to hear your John comments that chicory is gone to first. It can be bitter as a plant, especially as it does get a bit older. If you keep the stock on it and make them eat it, they will then get used to the taste and then go around without any problems at all. There we go. Sam, what increase in the red clover quality did you get from adding the additive? Did you ever use it without additive?
Yeah. From 17% crude protein to 21% crude protein, just like that. No mold, better color. So yeah, it was a win-win. Yeah.
I mean, it is very high in protein but very low in sugar, so ensiling it without an additive would be difficult. And one question on your plate metering, do you find it more difficult to plate meter with the herbal leys? Is the calibration need to be changed, or is it okay to use a plate meter with herbal leys?
Yeah, the calibration does need to be changed. However, I don't change it. So I work on the assumption if I'm wrong the first time, I'm wrong every other time by the same amount. And we have done quadrant measurements as well to see how much we're out, and we're out a bit. But you know, it's not that much. But I say if I'm wrong once, I'm wrong every time, and you can work on that every time you go to it.
Okay. A question for you all here is, have you all noticed a difference in live weight gain when the stock are on the multi-species sward, or is it the same as the perennial white clover? Or you talked about drought resistance, and you talked about anthelmintic properties. Live weight gains, can you say there's a difference?
The biggest
Sorry, Sam, you
Go on,
go on,
Sam.
because just because you're in that order, sorry.
Yeah. I would have said they're very similar to a very good perennial ryegrass. I didn't expect the blade calf to do 1 kilo a day, and they did 1 kilo a day. So the potential wasn't really there in them. You know, I was expecting 0.7, 0.8. So yeah, I thought that they did well enough on it.
Yeah, John.
The biggest difference to me is that post weaning with lambs is that there's more likely to be more cover there for them to eat, and so you would expect higher live weight gains because it's just a stronger lay than a old-fashioned ryegrass and white clover lay.
You've got forage in front of the stock.
They got forage in front of them. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
Simon, have you got anything you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at when we took some of these farms over, and then we've obviously ploughed them out and resown them and sorted out the lime and P and K, and then put new seeds in. We're basically doubling our yield from those old pastures to the new, and then each year our lambs doing better. We're getting heavier lambs. We're getting them away quicker. I mean, there obviously still that variability of the weather, which the old shepherd used to call it the buggeration factor. But yeah, there's definitely it's definitely working, and it's definitely paying for itself.
Yeah. And question for all of you again: how long would you expect these multi-species lays to last? What's your sort of thinking on that? Let's go around the other way. Simon, what's your sort of thought on the multi-species lay and how long you think it should last?
I think probably the last year or two. I think I've probably been a bit lax. We've got a new shepherd, and I think I've left him to his own devices a little bit, and I think he's been he has been overgrazing things, whereby years ago I was really on it in terms of rotational grazing. So I think it's a little bit my fault that things haven't lasted. But I mean, we were having red clover lays lasting 5-6 years, no problem at all. I think we just need to, this last year or two, I don't think we've been on it as much as we could have been, and I think we've spoiled a few fields. So work in progress. I don't know yet, but I would like to think that they'll last 2-3 years, maybe longer.
Yeah.
But I don't know yet. I need to just get this grazing management better.
And do you think that if the chicory or plantain or some of these herbs die out of the lay, will you keep the lay down as a grass and clover lay, or would you reseed it at that point?
No, I think we'll keep it going. I mean, as long as when we're I mean, basically each year when we've got our own forage wagon, we pick all the silage up and we identify those fields that run out of steam. Those fields that ran out of steam would then go into brassicas. No, I would hope that we carry them on, and I have actually I've upped the seed rates this time, and I've lowered the cereal rates. So it's just trying to get that kind of thickness of sward, which I think we're just a little bit spaced out at the minute in terms of where the grass is, and I think probably the whole crop isn't helping that, but I think I can iron that out in the next year or two. But no, certainly if one or two of these things do disappear, then if they're still yielding, we'll keep them going.
Yeah. John, how long do you think yours will last? I know yours are new, or that total multi-species is new in.
I'm in a 5 years grass, 5 years cereal system, and I don't want it going into year 6 because it ticks over into GR, into permanent grass, whichever it is. Yeah. And I'm convinced one day they're going to drop a reference year in and tell you that you're not allowed to that you have to maintain that same acreage of permanent grass. So I always plow in year 5, but my experience is they last 5 years fine, no problem.
Yeah, good. Sam?
Yeah, red clover 4 years, no longer. Mixed species sward, we've had some of them in 5 years. Some of my friends in England have had them in 20 years, but on a big rotation, a dairy farm on a big rotation. So you know, there's no reason why they shouldn't last the course. But I'm sort of sticking with John there. 5 years probably enough for them all.
Yeah. A couple of you have mentioned red clover during the course of this, and you know, Simon, I think you said that you'd grow more red clover if you can. We've got red clovers that are resistant to sclerotinia. We've got red clovers that are resistant to stem mealworm. We are struggling to find a red clover variety that's resistant to both, so that you could continually grow it. But we are making progress. We've got something coming out in the next few years called a red runner range of red clovers, which is stolonivorous. So although they're red clover, they will behave like a white clover. And we see that as quite a big advance in this grazing of red clover things, because it's got the PPO, the polyphenol oxidase, that's protecting the protein in the rumen. So we're getting more out of the crop. So that's something that we're working on very hard at the moment. And funny enough, we've had Corteva here this morning looking at how their weed control systems will cope on these new generation of clovers that we're breeding. So there is lots of work going on behind the scenes on these new generations of clovers and chemicals that are coming out. So hopefully that will help in the future. One last question. Have any of you noticed any delay in spring growth? But, you know, on the multi-species leys, is it any slower, any quicker in the spring, anything like that?
Yeah, we're a bit slower. We're a bit slower, been a bit probably further north, colder. We've had a very hard, cold, dry April, May, and we would say the mixed species parts of the sward were slower, the clovers and the plantains, until it warmed up a wee bit. Yeah.
John?
No, I haven't noticed that. For all the clover that we've got in it, red clover, white clover, I've noticed that we're still quite nitrogen dependent on getting early season growth.
Yeah.
If you anywhere we miss nitrogen, it just into May, it's still very pale and very, for all the clover we've got in it.
Yeah, we have, there's a rule in the sea trade of 358 perennial. Italians grow at 3 degrees, perennials are at 5, and clover's not till 8. So the soil temperature really needs to warm up before the clover starts to begin. And of course, it's not giving you any nitrogen back until it's properly growing and moving through its physiological stages to fix that atmospheric nitrogen and give it back to you in the ground. Simon, have you got any comments on spring growth?
Yeah, sorry, ask the question again. I was busy answering questions on the Q&A. So repeat the question, please, Ben.
Did you notice anything in terms of a lack of spring growth in your multi-species sward? Is it slower in the spring, just the same, or you know, the fact that you're having to think about it probably tells you that it wasn't anything particularly different?
Yeah, no, I think we're having the problem is every year is different, and we've had a really miserable spring this year. We've had the longest winter. We didn't have an easy lambing outdoors. We didn't have a lot of growth. It was cold, it was dry. So every year is very different. Certainly with the high sugar grasses in the mixes, and then the nitrogen that has been given to them by the clovers and things, our growth at each end of the year historically has been very good. I think this year is just one of those years when it was a hard spring. But reds, yeah, I don't think so. I think as long as if the management's right, if you've rested them, if you've got all the other things in line, so your P, your K, your lime, I think they'll be very similar to, given the same chance, I think they'll be the same as other things.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, look, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time and your preparation into your work. I know you're all busy people. I can't thank you enough for doing that webinar with us. We'll all talk again soon, but thank you very much. Thank you very much to our audience, and I'll wrap it up now and say goodnight. The recording will be sent out in the next sort of 48 hours. But once again, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.